name is Tommy Prudhomme. I'm the pastor here at Salado United Methodist Church. We're a church where everyone is welcome, where we seek on a daily basis to grow deeper into the love of God and one another, and where we reach out to our community and the world around us to share that love. I'm so glad you're here with us today, and I hope through this time with us that you will get to experience a little bit of God's love for yourself.
Good morning. It's a much brighter place here because of your face shining brightly. Thank you for coming. I am J.L. Alley, and I am here to read the verses for today that have been selected. But prior to doing that, I would like to make a statement here, because there's some words in this reading that we may not know. And the first word that we may not know is satrap. And the second word we may not know is prefects. Now, satraps is a person who is selected by the king of the place that he rules over to be his representative, his guidance, his chief person there to make sure that what he says goes. And prefects is a lesser traps. So you now know what those two words mean. Let me start by reading. So the presidents and satraps conspired and came to the king and said to him, "O King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an interdict, that whoever prays to anyone divine or human for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into a den of lions. Now, O king, establish the interdict and sign the document so that it cannot be changed according to the laws of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked." Therefore, King Darius signed the document and interdict. Now, although Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he continued to go to his house, which had windows in its upper room open towards Jerusalem, and to get down on his knees 3 times a day to pray to his God and praise him, just as he had done previously. The conspirators came and found Daniel praying, seeking mercy before his God. Then they approached the king and said, "Concerning the interdict, O king, did you not sign an interdict that anyone who prays to anyone divine or human within 30 days except to you, O king, shall be thrown into the den of lions?" The king answered, "The thing stands fast according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked." And then they responded to the king, "Daniel, one of the exiles from Judea, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the interdict you have signed. But he is saying his prayers 3 times a day." And when the king heard the charge, he was very much distressed. He was determined to save Daniel, and until the sun went down, he made every effort to rescue him. Then the conspirators came to the king and said to him, "Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no interdict ordinance that the king establishes can be changed." Then the king gave the command, and David was thrown into the den of lions. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you faithfully serve, deliver you." A stone was brought and laid at the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, so that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Now then the king went to his palace He spent the night fasting. No food was brought to him, and sleep fled from him. But then at daybreak, the king got up and hurried to the den of lions. When he came near the den where Daniel was, he cried out anxiously to Daniel, "Oh, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you faithfully serve been able to deliver you from the lions?" Daniel then said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth so that they would not hurt me, because I was found blameless before him and also before you, O king. I have done no wrong." Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. The king gave a command, and those who had been accusing Daniel were brought forth and thrown into the den of lions. They, their children, and their wives. Before they even reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke them into pieces. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples and nations of every language throughout the whole world, "May you have abundant prosperity. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion people shall tremble in fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, the enduring God. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion has no end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. For he has saved Daniel from the power of the lions." This is the word of God for you, the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Oh man, thanks be to God. Thank you so much, JL. When I planned this sermon series, I did not know that JL was going to be reading today, but I really enjoy story time with JL. I think we can keep that. We can keep that rolling. That's part of what I was hoping to accomplish a little bit by doing a more narrative sermon series, was to sort of let the power of the word speak and let the Bible speak for itself. So I know they're longer passages, but thank you all so much for reading them for us so we can hear these stories. Of course, Daniel in the Lion's Den is really one of the Hebrew Bible's most well-known and beloved stories, mainly because somehow it's become a kid's story, which is a little odd. I guess because people think lions are so cute, right? I mean, look at that. Like, you can sell that. Come on. Like, kids are going to buy this and scoop this up. I saw even one ad when I was looking for some cute lions that said, "Get Daniel and his cute lion friend." It's like, have you read the story? But lions are actually a little scary, like this guy. This is actually a lion that was put up as a taxidermy like this and was removed for being zoologically inappropriate and or frightening to small children. And I agree with this goofy looking lion that I guess someone thought was realistic. But lions are scary. I don't even like a house cat that's out of control. So I can't imagine what a cat the size of a car would do to me. But so somehow this has kind of gotten into that story, kind of like Noah, where we've sanitized it a bunch for kids to be able to enjoy it. But the lions in this story are really used as instruments of capital punishment for our friend Daniel. And like last week's passage about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or Rakshak and Benny, as we called them, this story finds a pious Jew dealing with the issue of fidelity to God and the pressure of worship to a false god. But this time, rather than a statue, it's the king himself, Darius, who asks for worship. And like his three friends, Daniel refuses to worship this false god. He continues to pray to God alone rather than the king. And of course, eventually the conspirators that are after Daniel, they alert the king and Daniel gets in trouble. And just like last week's story, Daniel experiences this divine rescue from danger and emerges from the lion's den without a scratch. And both stories, they have a very similar overall message, but if you notice, there are some very interesting differences in these stories as well. First, let's talk a little bit about the character of the king, which is an interesting contrast with the previous king we read about last week, because the king in this story kind of makes his own trouble. His own ego gets in his way. He starts to think when these conspirators come forward, "King, may you live forever. And you should make this decree that you are worthy of worship." And he seems to have no problem with this idea that, yeah, people should pray to me. And this type of ruler worship was not unusual in the ancient world. If you remember, the pharaohs of Egypt considered themselves to be emanations of the god Ra. Alexander the Great, who is one of the historical figures I was very fascinated by when I was a young person, as he went around conquering the world, everywhere he conquered, he made himself their god and tried to identify himself with all of these different gods and say, "I'm the emanation of Ra, I'm the emanation of Marduk, I'm the emanation of all of these gods," of course, until he gets to the Jews. And then there's a problem, because you can't say you're the divine presence of Yahweh. That doesn't work. But at least this king, his ego gets in his way, and once he realizes he's made a mistake, he has a little bit of sense, because he tries to figure out that once the decree starts to hurt Daniel, who he has a lot of trust in by this point in the book of Daniel, he realizes that he's made a terrible mistake. And he tries to find a way to rectify this mistake, and he seems actually personally bothered by this mistake. But he doesn't really do a good job of handling the situation. As he tries to deal with what's going on, he lets his counselors get him even more and more confused, because they tell him a decree of the king cannot be reversed. But isn't he the king? So why can't he just reverse the decree that he already made? Like, as I read the story, I was like, that doesn't even make any sense. But this king, he got so worked up about this situation that he couldn't figure his way out of it. And it was almost like he lost the ability to really see who he was as a person, that he's the king. He could just revert, like, this doesn't make any sense to me, why he can't just fix it. So he gets trapped into putting Daniel in the lion's den, and it bothers him. And he stresses over it, and he spends his night fasting and worrying, and he doesn't take any food, and he doesn't take any comfort, he doesn't get any sleep. He's worried about what he has done and the consequences of what he has done. Now, have you noticed this was very contrasting with last week's king, who got angry, mad, made faces, turned up the furnace, like he was all about being angry. And the odd part about King Darius in this story, for all of his ego and all of his desire to see himself as divine, if you really look at history, we don't even know which king this is. Bible scholars don't even know which King Darius this story even belongs to. There's no record of this King Darius. So I find kind of ironic that someone wanted to set themselves up that high, and history doesn't even remember who they are. But I think the king is set up as a foil to get us to look at the character of Daniel. In contrast to the king, you see Daniel is calm and centered. Now, last week, Rakshak and Benny, when they protested against the things that were going wrong, did you notice they were very vocal about it? They went back at the king and they started to argue and say, we're not going to do what you say. But instead, Daniel, when he finds out about the new law, he just quietly goes about his business. He stays faithful to what he feels that he should do, to go into his inner chamber and to get on his knees and keep thanking God for everything that God's blessed him with. He doesn't make a public show. He doesn't draw any attention to himself. And even when he's caught, again, there's no protest of innocence. You notice that in the story. You never even hear him speak. He just goes into the lion's den. See, Daniel's relying on God throughout this story. He's relying on God to protect him when he's faithful. He's relying on God to protect him from the king. He's relying on God to protect him from the lions. And in today's world, I really think that sometimes we have to have the wisdom to know when to be a Rakshak and Benny and when to be a Daniel. Because if in a world that is so chaotic and so filled with hate and so filled with uncertainty and anxiety, when people look to us who believe in God and they see the same things, I don't know what that speaks to them. But when we see Daniel, the calmness, the assurance, the faith in the things unseen, in the deliverance he can't quite make out, that speaks volumes, just as loudly as Rakshak and Benny's protest last week. And so I urge you, as I have to often urge myself, to maybe think twice before we speak, to lay our concerns for our future, for all the anxiety and stress that we feel about what's going on in our world, at God's feet, and try to learn to trust that God's got it. And I know that's a lot easier said than done, but I see some parallels to Christ in this story as well. It's not a direct reference, of course, but Jesus, of course, also faced all of the good trouble that he had made with calm. He was arrested, tried, taken to execution, didn't protest, didn't fight back. And while his rescue was not immediate like Daniel's, I would say it was pretty spectacular. And Darius's question to Daniel the following day, to me, is the central question of this story that Daniel had to face, Jesus had to face, and we today have to face. Was God able? For Darius, this is still an open question, leading to this sleepless night of fear and anxiety and this desperate trip to the lion's den to find out, Daniel, are you okay? But for Daniel, the question was faced with the calm assurance in God, with the outcome of the testimony to the king that indeed God can. When the first female disciples worked up the courage to head to that tomb on that Easter morning, they were also going to see, was God able? Now, the text tells us they weren't expecting an affirmative answer, but they were still going to check anyway, right? And to their surprise, God was able. God is able to bring resurrection in the midst of the darkest death, to take a group of frightened men and women and turn them into a bold group of people who changed the world and brought love and healing to millions and millions of people, including every single one of you in this room. Their witness has led to this point. So while the world spins around us in all of its chaos, we wait for the day when our hope can be answered in the affirmative. One of my favorite songs in the world, lyrically at least, is by a band called Thrice, and the song is called For Miles. Now, if you don't like hard rock music, you probably shouldn't go home and try to listen to this song because it's kind of a jam. But I figure we could all use the type of hope that I see in the lyrics of this particular song. And they go like this. I know one day all our scars will disappear like the stars at dawn, and all of our pain will fade away when morning comes. And on that day, we will look backwards and we will see that everything has changed. All of our trials will be as milestones on the way. And on that day, all of the scales will swing to set all the wrongs to right. And all of our tears, all of our fears will take to flight. But until then, all our scars will still remain. But we've learned that if we open our wounds and share them, that soon they start to heal. And as long as we live, every scar is a bridge to someone's broken heart. And there is no greater love than one shed his blood for his friends. Every time I hear this song, it gives me such hope and such a feeling of assurance, knowing that we serve a God who is able. So when we're faced with trouble that is brought about by circumstances far beyond our control, may we have the calm courage of Daniel and of Christ, because we are safe with the one who speaks to the winds and the waves and calms our seas. We're safe with the one who faced death and lives again. Amen.